You're listening to Ron Siegel's Home and Finance Radio Show, only on Financial News and Talk. Now live in studio, your host, local and national real estate expert and consumer advocate, Ron Siegel.
And hello again. Welcome to Ron Siegel Radio. This is the show with no real boundaries as we discuss current events, financial markets, politics, sports, even poking fun at the rest of the media. This is the show that connects the dots of confusion. Delivered by conflicting media reports, we connect the dots so you know the actions you can take, how your family or business can benefit from current events. Most of all, thank you for joining me. Within every market, there are solutions as well as tremendous opportunities. You just need some trusted guidance. That is my message, and I will be delivering it every day. We have a very focused show. We only chat about items that affect the roof over your head, your bank account, and anything I feel would benefit you. But before we get into our intriguing content today, please join me in welcoming our featured guest and repeat offender. Welcome back, Blake Vartanian, Realty Pro 100. Welcome.
Thank you, Ron. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you with us. And let me remind you, if you ever have any home or finance-related questions, I am the consumer advocate looking out for you. And you can reach out to me directly, 800-306-1990, 800-306-1990, or RonSiegelRadio.com. Just remember that's the number you call anytime for assistance. When you call that number, it comes directly to me first. There are operators standing by.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
While I do have a great team when it comes to developing a financing plan, a plan to save you money, I personally work with you even if you don't have any needs today. Save this number in your phone for future reference, 800-306-1990, 800-306-1990. And yes, we are celebrating today. We celebrate every day on Ron Siegel Radio. I don't get it because I'm looking at the celebrations, and we get a list of national celebrations. National Hot Dog Day.
It is what it is.
Didn't Nathan's already set that to be July 4th? Joey Chestnut, I think, was it 62 hot dogs this year? Just after Josh told me we're going to celebrate this day, I looked that up. Do you know that guy makes $500,000 a year eating? Now, I think I might spend that much eating, but $500,000 for being a competitive eater. I'm in the wrong line of work. I need to start eating competitively. Words with Friends Day. Yeah, I don't know about that one. International Retainer Day. How many people have lost retainers or have their kids lose their retainers? I don't think they're talking about retainers like with the attorney. I hope not. And it's also National Daiquiri Day. Okay. I'm not a big daiquiri person. Can I just stick with my martini, please? But today is not. Josh, do we have a National Martini Day? There should be a Martini Day, right? I mean, with a couple of blue cheese stuffed olives. Let's move right along. Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 176 points today. The S&P 500 is up 21. The NASDAQ is up 74. Oil is up once again. Too bad the president wasn't up when the oil prices were lower so we could fill the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Let's see what the gasoline is doing, though, because we watch that all the time as well. You know, just because I give you the numbers doesn't mean we have to like them. 1 year ago today, $5.87 a gallon of gasoline in the formerly Golden State. Today we're at $4.90 a gallon. Oh, I know, and the president will say, well, he brought gas prices down $1 a gallon. He brought them up three net. So let's not get too excited about that. And I think we're still not quite the highest in the land. Washington has beat us out in gas prices. Hawaii's still cheaper than we are. You know, they got so many refineries over there in the island. So I'm sure that's probably the reason. Let's see what else is going on. The 10-year Treasury, it's pretty flat this morning. Not a whole lot of activity going on right there. Anything in the news that we should be really looking at? Not a whole lot of excitement. I think I saw that Microsoft, they're going to start monetizing their artificial intelligence. See the stock price took a big jump as soon as they mentioned artificial intelligence and any kind of monetization. I think Microsoft's probably pretty close to all-time highs. $358, down a little bit today, but $358 a share. And one of the companies came out and put a $425 price target on it. So no advice here, but $358, $425. Maybe you want some Microsoft. I don't know. Take a look at it, though. Goldman Sachs did not have a great quarter. Kind of funny when you look at that one. So Goldman Sachs came out with their earnings report. Wasn't great. Right after Bank of America came out with their earnings report, and it was great. So that'll be an interesting one. Today, after the market closes, we're going to get Tesla's earnings. Now, I find this fascinating because you hear people talking about Tesla, you talk about Musk and how diversified he is and what does he know what he's doing? Well, I heard this story this morning. Analysts coming on. They make $9,500 on average for every Tesla sold. Now, you got to put that in context. Ford loses about $800 for every one of their electric vehicles sold. Loses $800. So maybe they'll make it up in volume. I don't know because, it's just a big difference. Now you wonder why is Tesla's stock right now at $296 and what is Ford? Well, you probably don't want to know that because Ford stock is significantly lower, $14 a share. And that was after a few years ago. I don't think they've reinstated it. But a couple of years ago when they started having so much problems, they stopped, they cut back on their dividend. So, they're still giving a little one, but that's a bottom line. Because if you keep losing money on these cars, the other one I heard this morning, I don't have an electric vehicle now because I've got the Charger. It's called gas. So here's the issue. In the heat that we're having right now, would you be surprised to know that the range on an electric vehicle could be cut by as much as 40% because of this heat? Oh, and speaking of the heat, maybe we want to hear about this one. John Kerry, you should be listening. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Such an idiot.
Yeah. Do you know that the heat wave that we've got right now is not even near as hot as it was in the 1930s? Wonder if they had global warming back then too. Or is it just history repeating itself? You got to wonder about some of these things. You're listening to Ron Siegel Radio, discussing your real estate, current events, and the financial markets. When we come back, we're going to chat about several things today. We're going to talk about explaining today's mortgage rates. We're going to talk about inventory of real estate because we have a project coming that you'll want to know about. We're going to talk about student loans. We're going to talk about what's the market really like here in Southern California. I think Blake's got some numbers on that. You can reach me anytime. Our off-air number, 800-306-1990, 800-306-1990, or ronsiegelradio.com, facebook.com/Ron Siegel Radio. And if you miss any part of our broadcast, Ron Siegel 1 on YouTube, Ron Siegel, the number 1 on YouTube. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few.
Ron Siegel Radio, your home and mortgage connection.
79% of all credit reports have errors that should be corrected through factual disputing. You could be saving thousands every year if your report was accurate. CreditSanitizer.com provides a free credit report audit when you furnish a specific $1 credit report. You can use this information to request corrections to your report and potentially save thousands of dollars. Get your free credit audit at CreditSanitizer.com. That's CreditSanitizer.com for a free credit report audit. CreditSanitizer.com.
You're listening to Ron Siegel's Home and Finance Show with local and national expert Ron Siegel. Now, here's Ron.
Welcome back to Ron Siegel Radio. Within every market, there are solutions as well as tremendous opportunities. You just need some trusted guidance. That is my message, and I will be delivering it every day on Ron Siegel Radio or anytime at 800-306-1990, 800-306-1990. The Mortgage Minute today being brought to you by our friends at Geneva Financial. When you're ready for that next home loan, Geneva's got the programs and the products. You just need to make the call, 800-306-1990, 800-306-1990. And every day at this time, OBMMI, they provide the most comprehensive, accurate, timely, and interactive analysis of pricing ever conducted in the mortgage industry, calculated from actual locked rates with consumers across 42% of all mortgage transactions nationwide. They do not tell us points paid, points received, APR. They only give us the locked rates. And since they've got a 42% market share, it's worth listening to. Yesterday, the 30-year conforming loans locked at 6.742, jumbo loans 6.939, FHA loans 6.694, USDA loan, 6.629, and the best loan on the market, 6.39. That would be the 30-year VA loan. Remember, every morning, if you want a market update, we do send that out by email. It's also on all of our social channels, but you can go to rsrmarketminute.com, rsrmarketminute.com, and we send out a little market commentary for the day. It's only a page or two, so it's not a whole long read, but let's take a look at what's going on in the market now, moving a little bit closer to today, what the markets look like. So the 10-year Treasury flat down 1 basis point, no big deal. The S&P 500 is up 20. Mortgage-backed securities, that's what drives the actual mortgage rates, down 17 basis points, which means that interest rates are up just a little bit today. Why? Well, we got housing starts fell by 8% in June to 1.434 million unit annualized pace, which was lower than estimates. Additionally, May's figures were revised lower when factoring in that revision. Starts are really down 12%. Year over year, starts are now higher by 8.1%. Single family starts, which is the most important, fell by 7% last month at a 997,000 unit pace. Housing permits, which is the future supply, were down 3.7% last month to a 1.44 million unit annualized pace, and are now down 15.3% from last year. Single family were up 2.2% last month, but is still down 2.7% year over year. Completions fell by 3.3% last month. Single family fell by 2.8%. When we look at the new supply, they'll be coming to the market around 1.4 million annualized, and subtract roughly 100,000 homes that need to be replaced every year, bring the figure to 1.3. It's well below demand or household formations that are trending at 1.5 million. What does that mean? Why do I share it with you? Well, it basically says we need 1.5 and we're not making that many. So rates are going to stay high because there's more demand. According to a recent report, for every 3 homes that are listed, there are 10 offers. Why is that important? Well, if somebody's making an offer for a house, most likely they want to buy a house, right? Otherwise, you have shoppers and you get the people that are out there shopping for properties. But if you've got basically 3 to 1, that's an indication of demand as well. So there's a lot of people that want houses, can't get them. That means Chapman University, are you listening? Prices are not going down on properties. Just throw that out there. I know Chapman wants us to believe the median price is going down by 11%, not the real property. NAHB Housing Market Index measures builder confidence, rose by 1 point. Present situation was up 1 point to 62. Future outlook fell 2 points to 60. Buyer traffic rose 3 points to 40. Remember, on these things, 50 is what a baseline is. So anything below 50 means we're contracting. Above 50 means we're in good shape. That's the Mortgage Minute, brought to you by our friends at Geneva Financial. When you're ready for that next home loan, Geneva's got the programs and the products. You make the call. Remember, rsrmarketminute.com will send you out a morning update on what's going on in the market every day, unless you're listening to Ron Siegel Radio, where we give you a little bit more in-depth. So that's, again, by our friends at Geneva Financial. Chatting this morning, Blake Vartanian, Realty Pro 100, is with us. And, we never know what we're going to talk about, Blake.
No.
We just kind of wing it. But, you're a little more organized than I am. So I saw this morning a message that you sent out talking about inventory in the market. So I just brought it up on my screen. Active inventory, not a lot out there.
No, there's not. Based on historical numbers, I mean, it is modestly increasing, but it's certainly not anything, dramatic. It's 1 percentage change, maybe 1 percentage point, a half percentage point in inventory. And we literally could have 3 times the amount of inventory we currently have in active in active listings, and still not have enough homes to meet the balance, what would be considered a balanced market.
Yeah, I'm looking at one of the numbers, and the numbers that you shared earlier today, they're not going to match what I'm going to share right now. Mm-hmm. And I know why they're not going to match, because I'm looking at a single zip code. You're looking at multiples, and yours is active listings. I'm just looking at single family. But I'm looking at Anaheim 92807. Total properties on the market, 28 this week. Last week, 27.
Yeah, so there you go.
Right, I mean, that's single family. There's nothing to buy.
No, in relative terms, compare that to, let's say, the 2008 cycle, you would have seen probably 40 to 45 in minimum in each of those zip codes, maybe as high as 60 in Anaheim Hills, each of the zip codes.
60,
maybe.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, at different times, depending on the cycle. Because this is the way I measure the health of a market. If you go down a street and there's no real estate signs for sale, it's a seller's market.
Okay.
All right. If there's one sign, it's a seller's
Let's
market.
Let's go back to that a minute, Blake, because when you say it's a seller's market, there's no signs on the street, and I want to buy.
Yes.
I could probably convince somebody on that street to buy if I pay them enough.
That's exactly the point.
So the seller's got all the cards in their hand.
They got all the cards. You're going to have to do something to move them out of their house, which is typically overpay them, incentivize them to get their attention.
I'm looking at, I just pulled up while we're talking, 92808. 8 single family residences. Last week there was 7, so somebody changed their mind and decided to sell. Maybe it was that one person that you just found on the street, right?
Could be. Could be.
So it's easy to say we're still in a seller's market.
We are definitely in a seller's market, and even with the the higher interest rates, based on historical terms, interest rates aren't high. They're high based on the last 10 years or 11 or 12 years.
Sure.
But if you go back, to some of us have multiple decades in our experiences.
I'm not that old,
right? And we saw double-digit interest rates, and there were still 8,000 sales a month in Orange County. If you go back and look at DataQuick in 1987, 88, at the beginning of the DataQuick measurement, it wasn't uncommon to see 6,500 or 7,000 property sales in a single month in Orange County with a population that's probably 1 million plus smaller than it is today.
Wow. Okay, so that's a big difference. So you said 6,500.
Yeah.
And I think that the chart that you shared earlier today shows 2,400.
Yes.
So it's about, rough math, don't hold me to it.
Yeah,
it's about 25%.
Yeah, we're not exact.
Right, about 25%. So there's a 75% shortfall of properties available.
And there are multiple articles that you can type in Google. What is the national demand for housing versus the supply? And there's about an estimated 4 million households that are behind in the demand curve that are trying to find a place to go. So they're looking for housing, but there isn't enough inventory. So when you're saying the new inventory coming on isn't matching the new inventory demand,
household formations,
then you have the household formations that are already existing that are looking for a new place to go, and that's not a short-term problem. And for some areas it is, because real estate is local.
Sure.
So you can go one block in the suburbs of, let's say, Portland. I hear is on fire around Portland, but in Portland it's actually on fire. I was
gonna say, Portland is really literally burning.
So I don't wish that on anyone who's made an investment or wants to call a place their home, because one of the beauties of home is quiet.
I'm going to throw it in there, Blake. I don't feel sorry for any of them.
Well,
because they voted for who they've got.
Well, that's true. We all
right. I mean,
we all get stuck with the leadership.
If you're not excited about Los Angeles and what's going on in Los Angeles, vote for somebody different.
Right. With a different
right. You've got that opportunity, but that's a whole different story. We don't want to get into that one, right? So, but the bottom line is and I like what you're saying, Blake, about the idea of the interest rates, because the interest rates are there. Maybe this is the new normal in interest rates.
I think when you look at how much the Fed is borrowing, I mean, they just gave themselves a $4 trillion credit line extension.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's what they did. So, I mean, could you imagine if you and I could just look at our bank account and go, I want another $100,000 to just miraculously be there for my spending needs?
My wife could handle that. She'd have no problem with it at all.
For some people, it might be a weekend, but
right.
for others, that would be a lifetime's worth of savings.
Yeah, and I've got a chart here. I'm going to try and get it over to Josh real quick and see if we can send this so we can share this. But if you look at the last 5 decades of mortgage rates, just amazing what they look like as far as going back to the 70s. 70s averaged 8.86.
Yeah.
The 80s averaged 12.7. The 90s averaged 8.12. And obviously, as I keep talking, I'm not getting it to Josh, so makes it a little more difficult for him to share it with you. But I'm gonna try and get it off there and see if I can. Josh, I'm gonna send this chart to you. Just I don't know when you'll be able to get it up, but the concept here is that interest rates are low by historic standards.
Well, and so there's different ways to address that. Let's say, there are housing stock out there that actually has separate units. They're not considered duplexes. I just saw a new construction a few months ago out in Palmdale, as an example. Beautiful homes, 5,000 square feet, with a built-in apartment. So
built-in apartment.
So 1 bedroom, 1 bath apartment. That's part of the builder's construction foresight. They were planning that these people, maybe they had a maybe a mother-in-law's unit or a grandmother's unit or rent it to a total stranger, and create some income to offset your mortgage. But there are people who buy homes and then they rent out rooms to help them because they can qualify, but then they don't necessarily want to have that big payment all to themselves.
Well, I'm a big fan of that. And I'm gonna let me walk through this because Josh just put this on the screen. Current mortgage rates compared in the last 5 decades. So 2010s, we got spoiled.
Yes.
Right, because 4.09.
Yeah, we were coming out of a historically bad, crash.
Right. And I think, what did I say
They
that
were trying to reinflate the housing market?
Today we're at 6.74.
Mm-hmm.
So basically we're a half a point higher than the 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And we're lower than the 90s. We're lower than the 80s. We're lower than the 70s. So we're not in bad shape there. It's just that we've gotten spoiled.
We've gotten spoiled, and it allowed the pricing to probably come out of balance to where it would have if interest rates had stayed, hadn't dipped all the way down into the below 3% market. If they had stayed in the 4 to 5 range, the appreciation that you're enjoying in your house might be a little less over time because it's only going to appreciate so far with the interest rate. So I think because people could afford a larger payment or could afford to borrow more money, that inflated the price. So I'd say the example I like to use is that a lot of the condo projects, as an example, in North Orange County, they had a lid on them for years at around 55,000 when the FHA limit was right at 55,000. And then they raised the FHA limit to 82,000, and almost overnight, the value of those units all jumped to the highest part of the range.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So as FHA numbers change all the time, it's fascinating where we go. We've got a viewer here that we should harass a little bit because it's probably taking on a party out there.
Oh, is he in there?
He's in there anonymously, but we know who
nice.
it is.
I was going to give him a shout out, but I decided not to.
Good. That's good. Hey, you're listening to Ron Siegel Radio, discussing your real estate current events and the financial markets. When we come back, we're going to chat more with Blake Vartanian, explaining today's mortgage rates. We'll chat about that, why you should care about student loans. We're going to talk about that as well. Reach me anytime. Off-air number, 800-306-1990, 800-306-1990, or RonSiegelRadio.com, Facebook.com/Ron Siegel Radio. And if you miss any part of our broadcast, Ron Siegel 1 on YouTube, Ron Siegel, the number 1 on YouTube. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few.
Ron Siegel Radio, your home and mortgage connection.
Is your budget getting blown up with high prices of gas and increased costs for other household needs? This is Ron Siegel, host of the daily home and finance radio program. Did you know if you have a low interest rate mortgage along with auto debt, credit card debt, or student loans, your family could potentially save $500 or more per month by restructuring these debts? If you'd like a free Borrow Smart analysis with our team, let's book an appointment to see how we might be able to relieve some stress. Schedule your appointment at rsrbsa.com. That's rsrbsa.com for your free Borrow Smart analysis. rsrbsa.com.
You're listening to Ron Siegel's Home and Finance Show with local and national expert Ron Siegel. Now, here's Ron.
Welcome back to Ron Siegel Radio. Within every market, there are solutions as well as tremendous opportunities. You just need some trusted guidance. That is my message, and I will be delivering it every day on Ron Siegel Radio or anytime at 800-306-1990, 800-306-1990. The real-time real estate segment today being brought to you by rsrmoney.com, rsrmoney.com. Explaining today's mortgage rates. Well, we talked about it just a little bit in the last segment, but I'm going to give you a little bit of history here in another part of this topic. If you're following mortgage rates because you know they impact your borrowing costs, you may be wondering what the future holds for them. Unfortunately, there's no easy way to answer that question because mortgage rates are notoriously hard to forecast. But there's one thing that's historically a good indicator of what will happen with rates, and that's the relationship between the 30-year mortgage rate and the 10-year Treasury yield. Here's a graph we're showing you that if you're watching us on RonSiegelRadio.tv, any of our socials, or the ABC News and Talk AM 1490 video feed, we've got a graph that kind of gives you a good indicator of what will happen with rates and the relationship as far as the 30-year and the 10-year Treasury. On the graph, you're seeing Freddie Mac started keeping mortgage rate records in 1972. So if we go all the way back that time, the average spread between the 30-year mortgage rate and the 10-year yield, the 10-year Treasury yield, is 1.72. What does that mean? So if the 10-year Treasury is at 4, just a flat 4, that means mortgage rates historically would be at 5.72. Got it? So that's the difference. That's called 172 basis points. If you look at the trend line, you can see when the Treasury yield trends up, mortgage rates will usually respond. And when the yield drops, mortgage rates tend to follow. While they typically move in sync like this, the gap between the two has remained at about a 1.72 between that for some time. But what's crucial to notice is the spread is widening far beyond the norm lately. Look at the graph that we have on here now, 2.828. Big difference. If you're asking yourself what's pushing the spread beyond its typical average, it's primarily because of uncertainty in financial markets. Factors such as inflation, other economic drivers, and the policy decisions of the Federal Reserve all are influencing mortgage rates and widening the spread. Why does this matter for you? This may feel overly technical and granular, but here's why home buyers like you should understand the spread. It means based on the normal historical gap between the two, there's room for mortgage rates to improve. And experts think that's what lies ahead as long as inflation continues to cool. Odetta Cushy, Deputy Chief Economist of First American, quote, "It's reasonable to assume that the spread and therefore mortgage rates will retreat in the second half of the year if the Fed takes its foot off the monetary tightening pedal. However, it's unlikely that the spread will return to its historic average of 170 basis points as some risks are here to stay. Regulations." Similarly, an article from Forbes says, quote, "Though housing market watchers expect mortgage rates to remain elevated amid ongoing economic uncertainty in the Federal Reserve's rate hiking war on inflation, they believe rates peaked last fall and will decline to some degree later this year, barring any unforeseen surprises," unquote. Bottom line, if you're a first-time home buyer, current homeowner thinking of moving into a home that better fits your current needs, keep on top of what's happening with mortgage rates and what experts think will happen in the coming months. If you want to keep on top of them, real simple, just get that 1-page or 2-page article we put out every morning, rsrmarketminute.com, rsrmarketminute.com. That's the real-time real estate segment, again, brought to you by rsrmoney.com, rsrmoney.com. Continue our conversation. Blake Vartanian is with us, Realty Pro 100. Been talking about, maybe it's an artificial stimulant to housing prices. So I'm going to throw the contrary at you, Blake.
Sure.
So in the last segment, you were talking about how property values increased as the FHA mortgage limit increased.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll submit maybe it's just as much the conventional lending limits as FHA lending limits.
So it could be.
Because they kind of move hand in hand. They're not exactly the same, but they kind of move hand in hand. Would you say then that if they were to lower those numbers, that housing prices would drop?
I think it would cut off the money supply for certain eligible buyers that could potentially lead to a drop.
Okay.
But I'm not saying it would definitely. It just depends how many people are looking to use that particular loan program. But over time, I think what we found was that with entrepreneurship came alternatives.
Right.
Right. And so the mortgage market used to be far more diverse than it is today.
Was it really?
Like
Okay.
my first home mortgage in 1979, I actually spoke to the lady who was funding my home mortgage.
Oh, okay.
So that stopped. The mortgage broker typically today does not go out and seek private financing from, let's say, a group of doctors who pooled their money together
Sure.
to say we
Sure.
can do 4 or 5 mortgages, we have enough to support and get a better than whatever 10-year treasury return. We can get a higher interest rate by putting up somebody's mortgage for them. That those type of loan programs by and large are they're no longer even legal, let alone encouraged.
So it goes back to what I was saying in the
Yeah.
real-time real estate segment that
Yeah.
that spread is increasing because of regulation.
Regulation, absolutely, and restriction of who controls the money. See, because there's not as many people competing because the government's only competing against one arm of itself against the other.
For the most part, yeah.
For the majority of mortgages. So I read
Like 70%, something like that.
Yeah, so it's
Vast majority.
that's a monopoly by any standard.
Sure, sure.
And so when you look at the number of households that are owned without a mortgage in the country, that's one of the reasons to believe that we're not headed for any type of massive correction as a nation, because 37% of the properties are owned without a mortgage, which means those people all have the equity to go and buy something.
37%.
That's what stat I just read a couple days
Wow.
ago.
Okay.
I
That's
didn't
big
bring
number.
it with me, but it's a big number.
Big number.
Well past 30, and you figure anytime you got 3 and 10 people,
Sure.
they can form a political party, but 30%.
Yeah, exactly. And they can argue with everybody.
You might even.
We don't even want to go there.
No, I know, but it's.
But the last number that I saw also was that of those with mortgages, the mortgage properties are at 42% loan to value.
Yes.
So even with a mortgage, you've got 58% equity. You're not going to go into foreclosure. You shouldn't be going into foreclosure.
No, if you're having trouble making your payment, you got several options. You can take on a roommate, or possibly look into if your place has enough space, can you add an ADU in the back? If you have to, sell it and take your equity, and don't leave your chips on the table if you can't afford to keep the ones you have.
And that's a big issue, which we actually have a segment right now. If you want to check out what Blake was just talking about, rsr3pctloan.com. rsr3pctloan.com actually talks about why that 3% mortgage could be killing you and holding you back. So we actually did a segment, Blake, talking about, and again, you can get the whole segment, rsr3pctloan.com. And it basically says, you got a 3% mortgage, but your household, you've got credit card debt and student loan debt and auto debt and unsecured debt. Your real household blended rate is somewhere between 6 and 8%. What if you sell your house, take some of your home equity and pay off your debts, take some of your home equity and buy a new house, and your payments are basically going to be the exact same as where you are right now with all of that debt combined, but you get that bigger house that you wanted.
I mean, that's the magic of actually having somebody do your homework for you, like you doing the homework, right? But for the average person to go and research all of that and calculate that on their own, they're not going to have the historical knowledge that someone like yourself is going to have to be able to fill in all the pieces and show them where the real value is, that there is money to be saved.
I shared that with a CPA I had a speaking engagement last week, and one of the CPAs came up to me afterwards. They said, no one's talking about this, but everyone's talking about there's no possible way someone's going to sell a house with a 3% mortgage. But there really is a way you can help yourself financially by selling.
Well, you read at the same time on let's say Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, whatever, that household credit card debt is skyrocketing in America.
Right.
Well, those people are borrowing on credit cards when they have substantial amount of equity in their properties. Like you just said, if the average is 58%, there's room to finance and get rid of the credit card debt and shred them. Don't clear them off and then start charging on them again.
That's the whole thing. Keep using them.
Right.
but don't pay them off every month.
Right.
And I heard a great one the other day. I said, because I didn't even think of this one. So I've talked about, we've all got a cellular phone bill. You can pay that with your credit card, and then pay the credit card from your, right from your for unautomated payment. But how many people have Netflix?
Yes.
Right. What's that? And I have no idea. $10, $15 a month, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Put it on your credit card, then send an automated payment from your credit card right away. And that way it keeps that credit card active, so it doesn't diminish the value in your FICO score.
That's perfect.
A lot of great information, and there's properties available. So I was just looking. The other thing, what do you attribute, Blake? I'm looking at this list that you had shared this morning. Orange County had of 2,400 active listings, 17 expired, 36 canceled. What is that saying to you?
Well, I mean, what it's saying is that, some people aren't fully prepared when they go into the escrow, or they've changed their mind. But oftentimes what happens is, we just had an example where someone hadn't filed their tax returns, and they were told they needed to file their tax returns prior to starting it. Their accountant didn't get it done, and then they ran down to the Santa Ana IRS office and had them hand filed, but now they're not in the system, so the lender couldn't approve
those tax returns, so they got to wait for a couple weeks.
Right.
Sure.
So it didn't really help that they ran down there and filed them. It probably would have been better if the accountant had just filed them electronically. They'd probably be there a lot faster.
Yeah, it usually still takes a couple of weeks, but
yeah.
But then again, in Orange County, you don't have to file until October 15th unless you need that income. But that's interesting information, because I look at it and I say, okay, now historically, is that a small number or a big number? That's 17 and 36 for the entire county.
I'd say that's for the entire county. That's a weekly cancellation rate. So I'd say that's pretty, it's pretty moderate. It's not a huge amount.
Something in Anaheim Hills says 0 expired, 0 canceled. Brea 0 and 1.
Yeah, we've gone through cycles where, if as a sales manager of a real estate company or owner of a real estate operation, if you put 400 sales on the board in a month with your team, you might expect 150 or 200 of them to cancel.
Really?
Oh yeah, we've been in those cycles
50%
many times over the last 4 decades. Yeah.
Wow. That's a big number.
Yeah.
Hey, you're listening to Ron Siegel Radio, discussing your real estate current events and the financial markets. When we come back, more with Blake Vartanian, Realty Pro 100, why you should care about student loans. And I might even share with you a program where we may have access to an asset manager that's got a lot of properties to sell. You can reach me anytime. Off air number 800-306-1990, 800-306-1990, or ronsiegelradio.com, facebook.com/Ron Siegel Radio. And if you miss any part of our broadcast, Ron Siegel 1 on YouTube, Ron Siegel, the numeral 1 on YouTube. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few.
Ron Siegel Radio. Your home and mortgage connection.
79% of all credit reports have errors that should be corrected through factual disputing. You could be saving thousands every year if your report was accurate. CreditSanitizer.com provides a free credit report audit when you furnish a specific $1 credit report. You can use this information to request corrections to your report and potentially save thousands of dollars. Get your free credit audit at CreditSanitizer.com. That's CreditSanitizer.com for a free credit report audit. CreditSanitizer.com.
You're listening to Ron Siegel's Home and Finance Show with local and national expert Ron Siegel. Now, here's Ron.
Welcome back to Ron Siegel Radio. Within every market, there are solutions as well as tremendous opportunities. You just need some trusted guidance. That's my message, and I will be delivering it every day on Ron Siegel Radio or anytime at 800-306-1990, 800-306-1990. The Borrow Smart segment today being brought to you by rsrstudentloanhelp.com, rsrstudentloanhelp.com. So I've been sending out quite a few messages, and you've seen on our socials, we've been really chatting and trying to educate folks on their current student loan situation. And the forgiveness plan, the president's plan, the old one was already deemed unconstitutional. The new one probably will be deemed unconstitutional as well. Just for a little short civics discussion, the Congress is the one that allocates money, not the president. So the president signs it into law, but the Congress has to do that. Kind of what the Supreme Court tried to tell the president a couple weeks ago. He didn't get it. But here's the issue. There are 11 programs out there that can help folks with student loan debt that are part of the laws. See, you can actually apply legal issues to these loans. Quick example. Had somebody sent me a message saying that they just retired from the United States military after serving 25 years. And now they've got to start paying their student loan debt that they had incurred prior to enlisting. And he said, well, I served 25 years in this country. Now I got to pay the country back. Okay, does that make sense? Well, there are public servant loan forgiveness programs that, if filed properly, no, they don't have to pay anything back because they've been serving the public all that time. I don't know all these different programs. Why do I say it's important? There are 31 million people in the United 31 million people that are probably working class, working age, that have student loans. There are about 160 million in the workforce. That means there's probably about, 1 out of 5 people have a student loan. If you don't have one, someone else does. And we've already seen where one person's student loans, they went to that company they got their name on top of some stadium here in Inglewood. I don't want to talk about the name of the company. They refinanced their public loans to $4,500 a month. If those folks would have gone to rsrstudentloanhelp.com, they would have found out that there's federal programs out there that would have made those loans at $1,400 a month. What does that do to that family's ability to buy a new house? There are these programs out there. You may not be the one that's involved, but I promise you, if you just have your eyes opened, there is somebody that you can help following the law to get them in a better financial situation. That is the Borrow Smart segment, brought to you by rsrstudentloanhelp.com, rsrstudentloanhelp.com. Continue our conversation with Blake Vartanian this morning, Realty Pro 100, just chatting about real estate and chatting about what the market holds. Now, and during the break, Blake, you and I were chatting a little bit about, how much some of these big institutions, Black Knight, I know, is a big, big holder of real estate. Have you seen that? And I don't want to get into the numbers because, we didn't talk about it. There's massive amounts. And yes, we are in the throes of negotiating right now to make some of these properties, not Black Knights, but another one, available to you. So make sure you're listening. But those companies that are absorbing so many properties, what do you think the impact is on the marketplace with something like that? Now, obviously, it takes properties out of the market. It probably increases the number of rentals in the marketplace. But my thinking, just off the top of my head, is those companies didn't get to be the size they are by thinking that the real estate market is about to crash.
No, they're investing in the fact that they believe it's going to keep going up because they got to return to their investors, or they're going to have to explain why they didn't get that return.
Have you seen something like this historically, where there's institutions are buying large percentages of the real estate in the marketplace?
Not so much in Orange County. I mean, you have companies with their, will buy, just like we have agents who bring investors who will buy directly from the consumer, explain what the value would be if they fixed it, if they sold it. And some people just don't want to put their house on the market. They want a private sale, and that can be arranged. But the overall trend, I think, in Orange County, because of the price point, or in Southern California, the price point, the demand, I think, these companies tend to buy larger swaths of neighborhoods in more outlying areas.
Sure.
Secondary, what I call the secondary market cities like Phoenix. And
I just got a listing of one in Chicago.
Okay, Chicago.
That was 23 properties all going to foreclosure.
Oh.
And so I called a friend of mine in Chicago. He says, Ron, you don't want to go in that neighborhood.
Okay.
Right. So, but again, that's exactly what you're saying there. Is those are probably, it's not a Newport Beach property.
Well, there was a time in the downturn in 2008 where I saw an article where you could go into downtown Detroit and buy a whole city block for $5,000.
Sure.
And I thought about speculating, buying just 2 or 3 blocks, just let the land sit there, but but then I realized it's not where I want to be.
Sure, exactly.
So it doesn't matter how much money I might be able to make. I don't want to be seen as that person owning that. And even if you turn around and make a profit, you're not a capitalist. You're a profiteer. You're a robber baron. You're that type of thinker. And I don't want to be preying on other people's misfortune that way.
Yeah, well, and it's a good way of putting it. It is other people's misfortune, but I'm the first to admit that back in the early part of this century, I used to do some of the subprime lending.
Yes.
And a lot of people look at it and say, "Oh, you're really taking advantage of people." And I said, "Well, Mr. and Mrs. Jones were about to be foreclosed upon.
Yeah.
And we lent them money on some of the equity of their property.
Mm-hmm.
Is that taking advantage of them, or is that helping them?"
Well, and for so many people in that cycle, I mean, I've told the story before of how I consulted with people in Yorba Linda whose home at that time in 2007 was worth 1.2 million, and they wanted 1.4. And I said, no. And it ended up within 18 months, it ended up in foreclosure going for under 800,000 because the values had fallen that far in such a short period of time. But it took what I call historic fraud in the lending practices for that to happen.
Sure.
And we're not dealing with that today. Today, the mortgages are checked and rechecked, and
a lot of back end checks,
right?
That people don't even know that. And Blake, you and I know this. There's a lot of check and fraud and back end re-verifications.
Absolutely.
That the average consumer doesn't even know is taking place.
No.
Right. And there are loans, and we were talking before about properties that get canceled or listings that get canceled. We've seen some of them where there was fraud detected in a back end search, or there's not. I mean, sometimes not even fraud. People are ignorant, right?
Definitely.
You've got a will or a trust that leaves a property to a minor, right? Can't sell that property, right? Because a minor can't enter into the contract. So they've got to get the judge to approve it, the whole 9 yards. So there's a lot of different things. Again, you want to make sure you're working with professional realtors and professional your whole professional team that has some experience and knows what they're doing to get the better outcomes.
Well, I mean, I've heard the stories through the years. I've never actually been in a transaction or seen it where somebody left in their trust. They left the cat, the executor. And I've heard, I've laughed when I heard it, but I was like, I don't know, I didn't know whether it was serious or not. But if they really loved their pet that much and their family or didn't want their family to have it that, with that much vim and vigor, then I guess the courts have to settle it out.
I'd like to see the cat sign those that grant deed, right? I mean, that might be a little bit of a challenge. As always, we appreciate you listening, and as always, I ask, set that first radio preset button to come back here and join Ron Siegel Radio, where we only speak about items affecting your house and your bank account. Thanks to all of our sponsors. A big thanks to Josh and Sean for engineering us today. And, of course, a special thanks to you for spending a little bit of your day with us. That's all for Ron Siegel Radio. Again, if you have any questions or to meet any of our guests, call me anytime. 800-306-1990, 800-306-1990, or ronsiegelradio.com. And remember, make a lot of money so you can help a lot of people and have a lot of fun. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time on Ron Siegel Radio.